Mr. Gethin, so good to see you again, my friend.
Yeah, it's been a long time, isn't it? It's been about a week now.
Be careful. I have to start showing up at your home and joining you
Oh,
on that treadmill.
well, be careful what you wish for, sir.
Yeah, that's for sure. If you ever come back to this side of the pond, we'll have to get together, or we'll probably meet in the middle somewhere.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, so, Kris, I have to ask a question that came out of your book. You have an app on your phone that tells you exactly how long you have to live.
Correct.
What's the name of the app? Because I did it with
Oh,
a spreadsheet, but I would love to know.
I've got it right here. I forget the name of it, actually. It's called Countdown.
Called
Count,
Countdown.
yeah, Countdown. And so it gives me a sense of urgency with a lot of things. So you can see the actual icon here. Let's see what I've got left. It's waiting. I'll bring it up in a second. But it gives me a sense of urgency because, we always get to like 2020. God, where did 2019 go?
Yeah.
We're always thinking, where did that time go? Went so fast. So it allows me to be a little bit more present,
Mm-hmm.
a little bit more assertive, like with the conversation that we're having now. I'm not messing around with my phone. And you go out to dinner and you'll see a lot of people, they're distracted, they're not really in the conversation. And I'm old enough to have the comparison to know what it used to be like. So
Yeah.
I try to bring it back a little bit, and that's one of the reasons why I live in Boise, Idaho, because there's 4 seasons here as well, and it helps me break up the year. So that app, some people think it's a little bit morbid because it counts down the minutes, the hours, the meals that you have left, giving you an average lifespan of, like, I don't know, I think it was like 90 years old or something like that, 85 years old. And so every meal counts, every minute counts, every conversation, every day, so I like that app. It's free.
Yeah, I love, like I said, I tried to back it out on a spreadsheet, but it's harder to carry around a spreadsheet with you all the time.
Yeah,
Uh,
so here it says I've got 37,000 meals. It's quite a lot of meals. I guess that's based on what I used to eat, 6 meals a day. And, there's basically I've got 43% power left if you're looking at this
oh,
visually.
wow.
43% power left back in me.
That's great. So look, you're known for the bodybuilding element of things, but you also decided to almost go to the other side of the barbell and do the Ironman. And I have to ask, like, what prompted the Ironman? Because you still are doing a lot of bodybuilding things. And like the Ironman, a lot of bodybuilders would think of that as death to muscle. What
Yeah, that's
prompted it?
true. Yeah, so I've always been somebody that's done cardio every day, if not twice a day. It just feels good. And, I don't want to just work out my delts and my traps. I want to work my heart. I want to work my lungs. It's not going to be my upper pec development that's going to get me to 100 years old. It's going to be the functional aspects of my livelihood within me is going to get me there. So a lot of people would frown upon that, but I found that I recovered very well by doing cardio a couple of times a day. I'm carrying oxygen-rich blood, nutrient-rich blood around to my body parts that I've just annihilated in the gym. So that allowed me to go from a typical 4 or 5 day split to about 6 day split. I was able to recover that much better, but still, what the haters are like online. So I figured, well, I know I'll go and do the extreme, and I'll give myself 6 months to prepare for an Ironman. And within that 6 months, I did an Olympic distance triathlon, I did a half Ironman, and I did a full Ironman. And I went to the lab at the university here and had all the tests, the DEXA scan, the FTP, lactate threshold, all these various tests to show that I would not lose muscle during this period. And I didn't. I actually put on muscle during that time. However, I didn't train and eat like a typical triathlete.
Mm-hmm.
I ate more and supplemented more than a typical bodybuilder, because I was still weight training in the gym as a bodybuilder, plus, still, what I do to this day, a lot of endurance activity. And I wanted to also merge the both, because a lot of bodybuilders are like mantelpieces. They're just there, and they don't want to exert any energy. And I think there's a lot they can benefit from the endurance world. And I wanted the endurance world to see the positive aspects of strength training for them as well.
Awesome, man. So let's jump in a little bit to that training regimen, because if you're doing bodybuilding and you're maintaining the muscle and you're doing the Ironman, that sounds like a lot. Was your entire life basically dedicated towards the Ironman at this point, or was there room for, you have multiple businesses, you got gyms in India. How did you keep it all going?
Well, do you know what? During the week, I was actually doing less cardio than what I typically do, because
Okay.
I like to do a lot of low-level activity, you know, like I'm talking to you right now on a treadmill. But I was only doing an hour of cardio a day, max, 5 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
And my weight training is usually about 45 minutes, 4 times a week. You know, it's not that excessive. You know, I'm the kind of person that gets up very early in the morning. I'm up at 4 o'clock in the morning. So I've got everything done by about 7 a.m. I've got my whole day then to, you know, carry on with my businesses. It was only on the weekends that things changed for me, because during the week, I'm doing a lot of hill sprints, a lot of high intensity interval work. But then on the weekends, I knew that I had to have time in the saddle. I had to get used to fueling myself without, you know, what they call bonking or hitting a wall. And I had to get comfortable being uncomfortable, but going long and slow. So I'd go for like maybe a 12-mile run on a Saturday, and on a Sunday, maybe an 80 to 100-mile bike ride. That was the only difference. But hey, it was my weekends, you know. But I'd leave early in the morning on my bike ride. I'd be back by 12, 1 o'clock.
Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like in reality, I've heard of Ironman athletes even have longer training regimens than that. And so,
Oh, for sure. So
and so
20 plus hours.
the ability to put on muscle then, was that mainly, what do you attribute that to in terms of that? Was that just excess calorie consumption, or the supplement regimen? There's some of it in the book, but was it just consuming an absurd amount of amino acids? What do you attribute it to?
Yeah, so it was a few things. Like nutrition was a big protocol. I was eating, sometimes like on a weekend, like when I was going long and slow for like an 80-mile bike ride, I could, excess of 5,000 calories on a Sunday like that. That was a minimum. 5,000 would be a minimum. So it was like a buffet, a moving buffet, I'd call it. So I'd have a backpack with food in my pack. I'm going out with some other triathletes and they're just eating a couple of bars and a couple of gels, but it was different because I was trying to maintain, if not build, muscle mass. A lot of it came down to recovery. That was a huge part of the aspect that is often overlooked. Your recovery your performance is dictated with your recovery. So I ensured that I got good quality sleep. I was quantifying my sleep. I was doing everything that I could to bring my cortisol levels down as low as possible, staying calm, meditation, breath work, things like that. Try not to be too stressed because I can be a little bit edgy at times. And that was a big aspect of it. A lot of hot and cold thermogenesis after a long bike ride or run. I'm jumping in the ice bath or cryotherapy chamber. And when it came to supplementation, like for instance, sometimes I'd go out and do my training fasted. So my body would be a little bit more fat adaptive on occasion, not all the time. But during that time, I'd call it a controlled fast. So I'm drinking my essential amino acids. I've got my fermented glutamine in my other bottle here. I may have my whey isolate, so a lot of my fluids were never plain water. It had some form of amino acid profile to maintain muscle protein synthesis. Like I've always got colored water with me.
I love it. And that's a gallon jug for those who are listening on the audio, or maybe even a half gallon. But one of the things you mentioned in the book was you quickly hired a coach. What was the role of the coach in this, and how did it help you?
I think a coach is very, very helpful because they can pull you back. If you look at a lot of athletes, whether they be bodybuilders or endurance athletes, we do tend to overtrain. So it's always good to have somebody to help pull you back. But this person's name was Alex Viada. And when I started doing this, I hadn't found anybody that had done anything like what I was trying to do until I came across Alex Viada, who's like a 200 30-pound power lifter who also competes in ultramarathon and Ironman events. And I got to know Alex. I reached out to him. Luckily, he knew me through social platforms. And we just got into conversation. And he was really able to really get a lot of knowledge that he could help me that I couldn't find in a magazine, or I couldn't find from even like a world champion Ironman athlete. Increasing the strength and the stability of our ankles because our upper bodies are so big. So it's very easy for us to twist an ankle, because all my running mostly was off-road. I was doing trail running to take the stress away from my hips, my knees, my back. But I've sprained my ankles about 8 times. I've broken my ankles as well from racing motocross. So he was able to help me in areas like that I never really would have thought of. And not always trying to go as far as you can, as long as you can, keeping these intervals into very short periods, but hard, never really going into a gray area. It was either slow recovery rides and running sessions and swimming, or very hard. It was never in the middle. And, it was good to have him to check my HRV and look at the training protocol. Based on my responses, he would change the training following that.
Okay, let's go into that injury. You had an injury prevention protocol, which I found fascinating, because most people, like myself, for instance, when I did a marathon, it was just sort of like, okay, how can I do a marathon in 8 weeks? It's not quite an Ironman, but I didn't have the injury prevention protocol in place. What did that look like for you? And at what point did you say, like, hey, I need this shit?
From the very beginning, because I've had so many injuries in the past from snowboarding. I've torn my pec, torn my hamstring. I've separated both my shoulder joints, torn my rotator cuffs. I've had so many injuries, but outside of the gym from extreme sports, which go figure. And I knew that when I started doing a little bit more running, I found that a lot of these injuries that I'd completely forgotten about started to surface themselves. And when I started researching a lot more into like marathon runners, I found that there seemed to be a lot more injuries within the endurance sector than the strength training sector, which was very surprising to me. Just that repetitive compounding movements, especially running. Cycling, not so bad. Swimming, fine. But running was the big one. And I knew, being a bigger person, exceeding like about 220 pounds, being quite short and having all these injuries was a recipe for disaster if I didn't really focus on injury prevention. So I'd get a lot of hate online because now I'm squatting on a Bosu ball with plates on my back. I'm on wobble boards. I'm doing rotations for my ankles every single day, doing a lot of stretching, having a lot of massage. And that kept me in the game for sure. I have had a couple of injuries, but they could have been so much worse hadn't I undergone that preventative measures. And, I've gone a little bit further as well and had stem cell treatment, which has really, really helped because, again, I want to stay injury free, but I don't want to get to 90 years old and regret the things that I've done now.
Of course, of course. Now, talk us through the race and how that went, because I have so many questions I want to ask you, but I want to hear first about the race and sort of what were the unexpected challenges that you faced? For instance, the wall where people bonk. Did you ever come up to that? How did that work?
No, I always erred in the caution of eating too much and drinking too much.
Okay.
When I went into the full Ironman, I was quite calm in comparison to the half Ironman because I did my half Ironman at Coeur d'Alene. So I knew the track. I knew the route that I was going to go into. I was just going to do like 2 loops instead of the 1 loop. And I'd got quite a good time in my half Ironman. So I figured, okay, whatever I did, I had all the times written on my swim, of my run, of the bike. And I thought, okay, I am just going to make sure that I time myself a good 5 to 10 minutes back from the swim, from the run, from the cycle. So I knew that I'd pace myself because I had a lot of cameras on me. This was filmed as a daily video trainer and it was published on bodybuilding.com. And they have like 4.1 million followers on YouTube,
Mm-hmm.
subscribers on there. So I thought, well, no one's going to care where I finish. They're going to care if I finish or not.
Yeah.
So I just really took my time and stayed calm. My parents flew over from Wales. They were there. And my father had always been with me throughout my motocross career. So I felt very comfortable and very calm. And I was also doing it on behalf of an all-girls orphanage in India. And I've actually got what's called a kara here that I got from the Golden Temple.
Wow.
And I remember swimming, because when the swim started, like I had elbows hitting me, knees hitting me, everything. And even though I'm a bigger person, I am very, very small in that water. You know, I had a little bit of a panic in there. And, you know, I thought, God, how can I regulate my breathing? Because I've got to stay calm within the swim. Obviously, you can't breathe, you can't swim. And I remember as my hand was coming in front of me and I saw this kara on my wrist, I realized this is much bigger than what, you know, issues or problems that I think that I'm dealing with in my head, because I'm taking an elbow or, you know, a fist to the face accidentally.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of just reminded me to stay on track. It's a very hot day. So I just ensured that I just stayed extremely hydrated, getting plenty of electrolytes in, because there were so many people that I saw dropping like flies because they were drinking a lot of fluid, but not looking at the quality of what was in that fluid. So they were dehydrating themselves really, because, you know, there was lacking all the nutrients, the sodium needed.
Yeah, for sure. So Kris, I want to chat before we go on to the bodybuilding side of things. You have this amazing entrepreneurial career and you have multiple businesses going on. You have the podcast, you have gyms all over the place, you have a supplement line, you have a massive social media presence. Let's start with the gyms. Where does India come into play here? Because it just seemed kind of a little bit random to find that, you know, there's Kris Gethin gyms in India.
Yeah, it is random. I get that question all the time. I published a book through Simon & Schuster back in 2010, and it was called Body by Design.
Mm-hmm.
And I was asked to go over to an event in India to do an appearance, and I had my books there. That book made its way to a celebrity over there named Hrithik Roshan, and he needed somebody to help transform him for this movie role called Kris, which is like a superhero trilogy. And this was one that he needed to get in shape in. However, he had ruptured a couple of discs in his back and he had problems. And I remember I was back in the UK at the time, and my manager called to say, hey, this guy, Hrithik Roshan, because my manager's from Indian heritage as well, even though he lives in London. And I remember just being in a supermarket thinking, Hrithik Roshan, who's this guy? I don't know who he is. And he wanted me to help transform him. Long story short, I had a consultation, went back over there. That 12-week transformation turned into several years, because of then I started working with other celebrities, because his transformation just hit headlines over there. And these actors are not actors, they're gods in India.
Yeah.
And so I stayed there for several years, but I knew that I could see that there was a huge lack in education in India. They're motivated, they're passionate, but lacking in education. And I was training a lot of personal trainers there in my fundamentals like DTP, Dramatic Transformation Principle. So I certified over 800 trainers and realized, okay, these people need an academy, but we can allow the public to come in as well. And that's kind of how Kris Gethin Gyms was formed. So it's with a real focus on the infrastructure. Of course, we have the best equipment and it looks great, but the infrastructure of the training, that's how it came about. And it's been going great. If you can open a franchise in India, I think you can open one anywhere.
That's absolutely true. You've seen many multinational businesses fail in India, so that's pretty impressive. Now, where in India did you start?
We started in Hyderabad. So
Okay.
I transformed a gentleman called Mahesh Babu, who's a South Indian actor, a very famous South Indian actor. And that seems to be the perfect place to start off our first facility, especially because I was residing in that area for about a year.
Okay. Awesome. And so you have multiple business lines and they're now all across the globe. Just out of personal interest here, how do you keep it all together without going insane? You know, how do you manage to stay productive on a day-to-day basis?
Who says I'm not insane?
We're
That's the
all just a
question.
little
Yeah.
insane, right? It's just,
Yeah.
we're all one
Uh,
step away from insane, or what is insanity?
yeah. I surround myself with real good people. I'm not very, I cannot admit that I can excel at one thing. I just can't. But collectively, maybe I can. And, I'm the kind of person that will read like 6 books at a time because I'll start to get a bit of ADD and I need to move on to the next one. So,
Yeah.
it takes me a while to finish those books. And it just keeps me interested. I like the fascination of seeing something grow, and then I want to see something else kind of grow alongside it.
Mhm.
And having something within this sector that I know and they can complement each other really helps as well. So obviously my supplement line complements that. My personal platform, my podcast, they all complement each other. And we
Mhm.
do a lot of tours and seminars. Like I'm about to go to India with Ben Greenfield now,
Yeah.
week after next. Well, I'm going next week. And, it's a perfect opportunity for us to spread the word. And you just never know what happens at one of these talks. Someone will come up with a business idea, a venture, and you just go, yes, let's do it. And the
Mhm.
next thing you know, there's another business. It's not always intentional. They just happen.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
And in regards to staying sane, I bookend my days. So I make sure that I don't check my phone for the first half hour in the morning. I've got what's called a feet up that helps me do a headstand in the morning. I'm meditating, I'm in front of my infrared panel, and I'll do the same thing in the evening. I'll just switch off because, I don't want the artificial light at that time
Mhm.
anyway, but I don't want my brain racing. So I'll usually just read in the evening, and that helps me stay sane. Especially, much like you've got work internationally. It can be very easy for you to get down that rabbit hole where you're in bed on the phone or answering
Yeah.
emails. Like you just can't do that. You'll get to the end of your life with the regret that you did it, so I always think to the future. What is my future self going to tell me? That I should have spent more time on the phone, or that I bookend and just put the quality time in? Because I'm more useful to people if I'm stress free, and I'll just be stressed if I was on it all the time.
And this is why apps like Countdown or having a spreadsheet that just reminds you how many days you have left are very helpful. This is great.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
Kris, let's go into bodybuilding because there's a lot of people here listening, executives, entrepreneurs, really high performing corporate professionals who are saying like, hey, I would love to put on some muscle, man. But either time is an issue or they just don't exactly know how to do it. They're also trying to fast. I guess let's take time because you are an entrepreneur yourself. You work out 45 minutes a couple times a week. Take us through just sort of some steps that people can use to put on some muscle if they want to.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the first thing that I say, especially to people or clients over the past 10 years, is stress management, because I'm dealing with clients that encounter much more strength than I did the decade before. And I think it's because of we're too accessible now. So with that, we give too much of ourselves. We never give enough to ourselves. We give away. So stress management is going to be the biggest thing. And fasting, that's absolutely fine. But I do get a lot of my clients to control their fast. And when I say control is, of course, we're not talking about eating food, but at least take some essential amino acids, not BCAAs, because the leucine can give you a high insulin spike, but essential amino acids, maybe some glutamines, just to help you stay anti-catabolic. But,
Mhm.
sleep is pretty much going to do the same. A lot of my clients, if I get them to quantify their sleep, they get about 5 hours.
Ouch.
But I function fine, Kris. I'm good. Yeah, you're not, because you aren't able to put on muscle. Those are the biggest things. And controlling your environment and not allowing yourself to get controlled by it, because people throughout the week, they're very good. They're at work, they're scheduled, they're on time, they get to the gym in the morning, but the weekend throws them off. Social gatherings, parties, sleeping in. And you just have to learn to, don't think of your weekend as WEA weekend. It's your weekend. There's 7 days. Don't think of it being any different to the other 5 days. Stay on schedule, go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time, and just put yourself first. And, the environmental factor all comes from the neck up, not from the neck down. You can blame your genetics. You can say that someone's getting results better than you, but it all comes up to, from the neck up. You've got to change the environment that is crying doubt, weakness, and excuse in your head.
And you've done some great posts on mindset and that kind of stuff, but let's break down into like tactical. How often should somebody be training? Is there a right number for people? Is it 5 days a week? Is it 3 days a week? Is it one? What do you think?
Weight training, it can be anywhere from 3 to 5.
Okay.
3 to 5. I work with mostly people that are just off the street, or entrepreneurs, or, people who want to maybe compete in a bodybuilding show or an Ironman. They're not professional athletes. Mm-hmm. If somebody's a professional athlete and they're on extracurricular supplementation, those people can probably train 6 or 7 days a week. The rest of us can't. So 3 to 5. Why I say 3 days a week weight training is because I've had clients who do own various business and they hardly sleep and they're stressed. So they're not going to do well training 5 days a week. They'd probably do themselves more harm. So I'll get them training 3 days a week for an hour each time. Other people who are sleeping well, they're quantifying, they're hydrated, they're eating, they're stress-free, then 5 days a week is perfect. And again, for about 45 minutes. It's all about quality, not messing around with your phone. Put that in the locker and it's quality time. But cardio, I get everybody to do cardio every single day. We are designed to move, much like, think of yourselves, our ancestors, they had to hunt, they had to gather. And that's what I always like to try to get my clients to do as well. If they cannot always get to the gym, then, stand up and sit down 50 times that day. Stop after 30, 60 minutes and actually do some push-ups, do some burpees, just some sort of movement, especially after a meal to bring your blood sugar levels down. Sometimes I'll wear a blood glucose monitor. Yeah. And if I can get my clients to do so, I'm always thinking, okay, activity after a meal, and that'll help regulate your blood sugar levels as well.
Mm-hmm. I want to come back to that daily cardio thought in a second. But when we're looking at, and we can answer this question in 2 parts, but when you're looking at a 3 or a 5 day training split, what does kind of the body part regimen look like? Because, somebody like me, I love, for instance, like traditional West Side splits of that max effort, upper and lower, and then dynamic effort. It's blown up my nervous system before. But, when we look at your average run-of-the-mill person, how do you split up body parts, or however you want to call it?
Yeah, it's usually 2 to 3 body parts. So, it could be chest and tricep, back and biceps, legs and shoulders. And we'll throw abs and calves in there as well. Okay. So that would be like a 3-day split. So I usually like to go for more so like the bro split, dependent on, what that client is needing. But sometimes it'll be push-pull. So one day we'll just do all pushing movements. Other day we'll do all pulling, and then they'll take a day off. And then they'll repeat that again, but with different exercises. Let's say that, Monday, Tuesday, take a day off. Thursday, Friday, we do the same push-pull, however, different movements. I usually like to block off the workouts into 4-week increments. So they'll follow a workout for 4 weeks. Then based on their response, how they feel, what's hurting, what isn't, what exercises they get a good mind-muscle connection on, they don't, then we change it over the next 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm. And so those exercises that they do get a good mind-muscle connection on, are you switching it to encourage more adaptation, or are you keeping it the same?
No, I encourage it to more adaptation. So, they should always beat their previous weight or reps. Yeah. Every time. All dependent on the exercises and all dependent on the rest periods, because if I'm going to get their rest period only to be like 45 seconds, then they're probably not going to increase in strength. But sometimes I'll get them on a strength protocol where they're going to be resting for about 2 to 3 minutes, and it's all compounds. Mm-hmm. So then we will go by strength adaptation.
Mm-hmm. And what about deloading in these things? I always, when I was doing CrossFit, there was always a deload week, right? Now that I'm by myself, there's kind of a deload day built in. But how do you look at deload for people, particularly busy people who may be thrashing their nervous system in other areas of the world?
Yeah, well, if there's thrashing their nervous system, then the chances are I've got them on a 3-day week protocol anyway, maximum.
Yeah.
And, you know, on that non-training day, they're doing like some low-level cardio. There's no hit. Because a lot of people love doing a hit, and that's absolutely fine. Great for anti-aging purposes, mitochondrial purposes. But if I've got them on a calorie deficit and, you know, they're hitting you know, large muscle groups. They're training deadlifts, squats, bench press, stuff like that. I don't want to spike their cortisol again. So I usually just get them to do very, very low level activity. And that's like that's their deload, like, you know, stress free. But if they're going, let's say if they're dieting over a 12-week period, over that 12-week period, at the end for about 10 days is a complete deload.
Awesome. And macro splits for people who are looking to, let's say, put on muscle and put on weight. Do you have a specific split that you focus on, or do you look at it in terms of the individual? For instance, could you use a ketogenic diet and put on size and muscle at the same time?
Yeah, for sure. I'll put people on keto, especially if they've created a lot of insulin resistance over time and I just want to reset them. Other people I have on a cyclical keto approach and put on muscle just fine on that. A lot of that comes down to, as you know fully well, with a lot of the blood reports and their DNA testing and stuff like that, that can help a little bit with a pinch of salt. But when it comes to the usual macro split, it's usually 40-40 carbs and protein and 20 fats.
Okay. Awesome.
You know, and one thing that I always try to insist upon is that it's, you know, it's grass fed, it's organic, it's humane raised, it's locally grown, because, you know, I could tell them to go eat salmon, but if that's farm salmon, that's going to have a completely different calorific and omega content compared to, you know, your wild caught.
Yeah, absolutely. So not necessarily like the IIFYM approach, but more with the approach of getting the wild organic type. That's great.
Exactly. Yeah. And I always tell people, you know, people that follow the, you know, if it's your macros, I don't believe in that at all, because it seems to give people the justification to go and eat Twinkies and hot dogs and all sorts. And I always tell them, like, think about the calorie. What information do you want that calorie to give you? Is it going to heal you or harm you? A lot of the time it's harming people, but it makes them feel good, but it's not going to make them feel good in the future.
Coming back to your cardio, you do it every day. And I have to ask, this is going to be my last question before we go into the final rapid fire questions. How do you fit it in every day? What does that look like? Is it on your treadmill desk, or are you outside, you know, doing a little bit of running? What does that look like for you?
I try to get outside once a day for sure. I want to get the sun. I want to get the restorative red light whenever I possibly can. And it makes me feel good as opposed to being stuck underneath the artificial light all day. So I get one of the sessions there. The other sessions all mix up. So I could go down into my garage. I've got one of those Carol bikes. I'll get on the Carol. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah,
absolutely love it.
One of my favorite devices. It's great.
Yeah, you must be sick too.
we all have a little bit of a sadistic side in.
Yeah. So I'll jump on that. You know, I love that, especially if I'm short on time, like I've got to fly on Saturday early. So I'll probably jump on there before I go. I've got a curved treadmill downstairs as well. Sometimes I'll do some work on there, some sprints. I've actually got a pain cave downstairs. So I'll do like a lot of functional work, like a lot of box jumps, kicking the bag, flipping the tire in the street here with weird onlooking neighbors coming my way. And so I like to mix things up. I like to change things up constantly. It helps me stay mentally stimulated.
Next time you're in Amsterdam, we're going to have to compare pain caves.
You've got a pain cave too.
Oh yeah, except for my pain cave is kind of the European size, which is jammed into a lot of room, and I throw it in my backyard every once in a while when the sun's out.
Yeah, that's a go. That's my way of socializing, because I'm not a social person at all. So I invite some friends around on a Saturday morning and we just hit it, and then we go jump in I've got a sauna out the back. We'll jump in the sauna, then we all jump in the ice bath, not together, but I've got like a cattle trough and we'll jump in there. And that's my way of socializing, because otherwise I'm not going to fit into one of those blue zones, you know?
Exactly. You got to get the social aspect of health. That's for sure.
Exactly.
Kris, final rapid fire questions for you. And some of these you might have touched on already on the podcast. But first question is what book has significantly impacted your life and your ability to show up and perform in it?
Tribal leadership. I really like tribal leadership.
Oh.
It made me realize that, anything more than like a tribe of 7, that you dilute yourself. It's very hard to keep that community within your business. That's where I use it more than anything within my career. So tribal leadership would be the big one.
How do you unwind?
Usually reading a book.
What's the best piece of technology that you've bought in the past year or has been given to you?
Oh, over the past year, I'd say the BioStrap for my HRV.
Awesome. Favorite vacation destination?
I don't know if I've been there yet. Bali is where I want to go. Thailand is pretty cool.
I'm getting married there this year if you want to come and join.
Oh, really? Yeah. You are? Awesome. Yeah, I know so many people that have been there and they just have everything but great things to say about it. The Hanging Gardens looks really, really good there. Really nice.
I'll text you afterwards, but if you show up in August, we'll make room for you. That's for sure.
August. Cool. All right. Thank you.
Awesome. Kris, where can people find out more about you, all of the stuff you're involved in?
Okay, they can find me on my socials, like on Instagram, Kris, K-R-I-S, Gethin, G-E-T-H-I-N. I'm pretty good on there. My website is healthkick, K-I-K.com. Also got, my supplement company and whatnot, but you pretty much find me on Instagram. It's probably the best place.
Awesome. And we'll link to all of this in the show notes, guys, at decodingsuperhuman.com/Gethin. That's Gethin. Kris, it's been a pleasure getting to know you over these past couple of weeks. And I am serious. Come to Bali. I'd love to get to see you in person.
That could be just the excuse that I need to get my butt over there.
Awesome, my friend. To all the superhumans listening to this, have an epic day.